All right, so let's go ahead and let's start wrapping up here with step 5. So in this final step, we're going to really sort of bring together everything that we've been doing. We've already got our timer, we've got our score and everything. So in this step, we're going to have a game over screen. That's going to show us what our high score is, and it's going to give us an option. We're going to be able to restart the game and try it again to beat the high score. Um, so that's going to be what we're going to do in this step. And this game over screen is going to show up when our timer countdown reaches 0. Okay? So there's no new major built-in functions or concepts that we're going to go over in this step, but it's really, like we said, a synthesis of some of the things that we've already been doing. Okay? Now like we said, we already have a timer that stops when it reaches 0, but now what we need is we need something to actually check the timer and actually end the game at the right time, right? So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is let's go to create a new variable at the top of our game, and this is going to be a game over variable, all right? So let's go ahead and head up here. I'll go ahead and start running this. Okay, so var game over, and I'm going to set it equal to false. Okay, so this is we talked a bit about Boolean variables before, something that's either true or false, and we've seen that with if statements, right? So or conditional statements. So we're going to start out with a variable game over that's going to be equal to false. Okay, so when we start to play the game is not over. So that's why game over is false. Okay. And the idea is that once the timer hits 0, we're going to set game over to be true. All right. So let's go ahead and let's go down and create a new function called check game over. All right. And this is going to check to see if we need to change game over to be true. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write a new function. It's going to be called game actually check, let's call it check game over. Check game over. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that, let's see, if the timer is less than or equal to 0, and we're going to set the game over to be true. Okay, if that's the case. So game over equals true. All right. So if the timer is, so really we shouldn't expect the timer to be less than 0 because we said that it's going to be stopping at 0, but just in case we'll do less than or equal to 0. Okay. So we're also going to add, and we'll look in a second at actually calling this check game over function. But while we're down here, let's also add a function to restart the game if the player presses enter. Okay, so what's going to happen is when you get to the game over screen, if the player presses enter, it will restart the game. All right. So we're going to do a couple of functions that will help us to do that. So the first function we're going to do is a function called check restart. All right. So let's go ahead and start writing that function check restart. Okay. No arguments for this function. And here we're going to be checking for a key press. All right, so this is very similar to what we did when we were checking the input, right? The keyboard for the arrows. So we're going to do the if key is down. But now we're going to be checking for the enter key. All right, so it's the key code for that is just enter. All right. And if we press enter, then we're going to call another function called restart game. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and write this function here. Another quick function. And what the restart game function is going to do is it's going to reset all our variables to their starting variables except for a couple of them. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. So function restart game. Okay. There's some, so let's set the players positions and the treasure positions back to their original values. So we'll do player X equals 10, player Y equals 10. Okay. And then treasure X was at 300 equals 300, and treasure Y is at 300. Okay. So this sets the game, the player and treasure positions back to their original values. We also are going to want to reset the timer back to its original starting point. So we're going to set the ticks equals 0 as well. And we'll set the timer back to 10 seconds as well. Okay. And then the last thing we want to reset here is we're going to reset the score. So we're only going to reset score equal to 0. We're not going to reset the high score because we want to keep the high score. We want to keep track of that. So if we beat the high score when we restart the game, we want to retain that information. So we'll reset the score to 0, but we're not going to touch the high score. Okay, and then the other thing we're going to do is set game over equal to false again. Okay, so we didn't reset the high score, and we also didn't do anything with the sprite variables like player, like the player sprite and treasure sprite. We don't need to, those haven't changed, so we don't need to do anything with those and restart game. Okay, so we wrote a couple of quick functions here, and that should give us everything that we need to restart the game and do our little game over screen. Okay. And like we said, you can see that these functions didn't really introduce anything new, but what they did was they really built on the concepts that we've been working with throughout the previous steps. Okay. So now, we need to go to the draw function, and we need to we need to make some changes. So one of the things that we know that we need to do is we need to call these functions that we've just written. So we've already called restart game inside of check restart, so we don't need to do anything else with restart game, but we still need to call check game over and check restart. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back up to our draw function. Now, before we call these new functions, let's make a distinction between what needs to happen when the game is running. Okay, so when the game is not over, we're going to be allowing the player to update the to move the player sprite, right, and to update the score. So we only want to do that if the game is not over. All right. Once the game is over, we don't want to do that stuff again. We're not going to draw the player or the treasure sprite out anymore, and we're not going to allow the player to move or update the score. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and underneath background, let's make a little bit of space, and we're going to take these 4 lines, these 2 image calls, and the check input and check treasure touch, and we're only going to run them if game over is equal to false. Okay, so I'm going to put an if statement. So if game over equals false. Okay, so again, we're looking at this double equals sign, right? We're looking at that equality check, that equality operator. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put these 4 lines inside of the if statement. All right, I'm going to indent them a little bit so it's easy to tell that they're inside of this if statement. All right, so we're going to only run these when the game is still running. Okay, so let's look at what we have so far. Okay, so we're able to run. The timer's still going. A couple seconds left here. Okay. So the problem, though, is that we have not added anything to change game over. Okay. So we need to still call our functions to check to see if game over needs to be changed to true. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So at the towards the bottom of our draw function, maybe underneath of where we do the timer update, let's call check game over. Okay, check game over. All right. Okay, so now if we run it again, we should now notice that the score will stop updating and it won't draw anymore once the timer runs out. Okay? All right, good, good, good. So, we confirmed that part, but now what we want to do is, if the game over is true, then we want to go ahead and we want to do our, we want to do the rest of our game over screen, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So after check game over, let's put an if statement and check to see if game over is equal to true. All right, so if the game over is true, then really what we're going to do is most of this is putting out text to the screen. Okay, so we're going to put out some game over text. So game over. Okay, and I'm going to put this out maybe at width divided by 3, so not quite the middle, and height divided by 2. Okay, so that's going to be our game over. It says game over. And then we'll put the text for the high score. Okay, so high score. All right, and then we'll do, let's see, plus the high score. Okay. And then we'll put it maybe at width divided by 3, and height divided by 1.5. Okay, and you can experiment with where you want to actually place this stuff out. And then we're going to do check restart. Okay, so then check restart will be listening to see if the player presses the enter key. Okay, so and if you want, you can even add maybe something that maybe add a message that lets you know that you can press enter, alerts the player to press enter to restart. Okay. Okay, so now one last thing we want to do. We didn't actually update the high score. So let's go down. Where do we update the score itself? So it was in check treasure touch where we added to the score. Now what we can do is let's add something after maybe at the end here, and say that if the high score, if the new score is greater than the high score. Oops. Okay, so if score is greater than high score, okay, then that means we've beaten our high score. Okay, so if the new score is greater than the high score, then all we do is we make the high score equal to the current score. Okay, so now as every time that score goes up by 1, we'll check it against the high score, and the high score will continue to update as needed. Okay, so now if we run this, let's go ahead and run it out. So right now our score is at 0. Okay, so I'm going to touch this a couple of times. Maybe I'll do 4. Okay, so the high score is 4 now, and you see we have our game over message. Okay, now if I go ahead and press enter, let's see if we can get maybe 5 or something bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now our high score goes up to 6. So our high score is updated. Okay, so now we have a complete game here. So congratulations if you've gotten to this point. If you have any errors or anything, just go back and look over the code here, and if you look in the comments and notes and whatnot, there's links to the complete code for each step. And take a look at some of the debugging tips we talked about in step 1. And there's a special debugging uh, help section that I've included as part of this lecture as well. So just check and make sure. And if you have any trouble with this game, you can feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the notes and comments. And actually, I will also give you the contact information here. So my contact information, you can send an email to contact@cloudyheavengames.com if you need any further help. All right.